This is Amanda Edwards, and I'd like to welcome you to the Edwards Empowerment Talks. This podcast provides a platform to empower individuals and the community by showcasing stories of resilient people who have refused to let life's challenges prevent them from achieving their dreams. The Edwards Empowerment Talks will also highlight the work being done in the community that will help to positively shift the trajectory of this nation through stories of adversity, perseverance, drive, struggle, and success. The podcast will empower others to believe in their dreams and pursue those dreams despite whatever challenges may come their way. It is also a vehicle to equip the community with the tools necessary to be the change they want to see. I welcome you to tune in. You don't want to miss this. Welcome to the first episode of the Edwards Empowerment Talks. I'm Amanda Edwards, and I'm so excited to be here because this is going to be providing a platform for people to be empowered and also to empower their communities. I am so excited about our first guest, who happens to be the mayor of Ithaca, and it happens to be my friend Svante Myrick. Mayor Myrick, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Good to see you.
Good to see you. And how have you been? I know things have changed since the last time I've seen you. You've been out working. It's been a pandemic, lots of social unrest. How are things going with you?
Yeah, that's it. That's about it.
Staying in the house.
Since we were last together, we've got a global pandemic on. It's impacting us here in Ithaca, beautiful Ithaca, home, of course, to 3 colleges. Trying to figure out just how we can build a bridge towards an economy that is less reliant on these schools if this new normal includes a lot of online learning while still dealing with the uprisings around police killings and calls for racial equality and doing all that while trying to keep myself sane. So yeah, a lot going on, but thanks for this break. It's always nice to talk to you.
Absolutely. And are the students back at school yet, or in terms of the college campuses?
So it's a mixed bag.
Okay.
TC3, which is the community college, is delayed.
Okay.
Ithaca College is going to stay online all semester, and Cornell University is coming back right now. So their classes have started. The students are back on campus, and so it's a mix between all 3, delayed, an online, and an in-person version.
Well, I wanted to have you as my first guest, first because you have such a powerful personal story, but also because I think people need to hear right now a means of being inspired. They need to hear about how they can go about using this moment in time as potentially a pivot point for them in their lives, but also just how did you keep moving past any adversity that you faced? And of course, I'd love to hear your thoughts about what's going on now and how people can get involved so that we can make a positive difference. So with that being said, just a little bit about your background, and of course, I'm going to let you share your own story, but one of the things that inspired me most about you is the humble beginnings and how you were able to defy the odds, having been a homeless child to now, of course, being the mayor of Ithaca. But when you were elected mayor of Ithaca, you actually were the youngest ever in its history being elected as the mayor. So how did you go from being homeless to, of course, now running a city of its size? And I'd love to hear just kind of a little bit about your background and what things were like when you were young Svante.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and back when I was young, this is the funny thing about being elected. Thank you for mentioning I was the youngest mayor, and it made quite a few waves. That was 9 years ago. So when I first got elected, there was all these news stories, and I met this mayor, who I won't say who it was, but I met this mayor last year, and I said, I'm the mayor of Ithaca, and he goes, oh yeah, Ithaca used to have this young mayor. He's like, did you beat him, or did he leave town, or what happened? This is what happens.
Yes.
Yeah, so 9 years of late nights and long meetings.
You're still a younger mayor. How about that? There you go.
It's just, I'm still 10 years younger than our next youngest mayor.
There you go.
I don't feel it.
So you're setting records every day still.
Oh, it's like city miles in a car. It's a fascinating story. It's really an American story, and it's one that I'm worried is becoming less and less possible in the America that the current administration is creating. Because I was always fortunate to be surrounded by people, by programs, and by like government programs that supported me and supported my family. And maybe I'll start from the beginning, which is my father was a Navy veteran. Started using in the service and kept using up through my mom's pregnancy, and disappeared with our rent money when she was 6-ish months pregnant with me. And when she's 7 months pregnant, she gets laid off because back in Florida at that time, there's no paid family leave. There still isn't. We need paid family leave all over the country. But she gets fired simply for being pregnant.
Wow.
And then when I'm born, I was a blue baby. I don't know if you know blue baby with the umbilical cord. It's wrapped around your neck, so your head's all big and blue. It's a surefire way to be smart and charming.
Oh, that's what it's about. Okay.
It leads directly. The textbooks will tell you this.
Okay.
And the long story short, so we had to stay in the hospital. At any rate, when we came home from the hospital, we had an eviction notice on our door, and all of our belongings were out on the sidewalk. And so my mom carried this newborn along with her 2 older children into a homeless shelter. And we lived there for the first 6 months.
So how many? Okay, so you had 2 older siblings.
Yeah.
And how old were they when you were born?
It would have been 4 and 2 years old.
So she had a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, and an infant.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Wow.
One with big blue head, crying all the time. And she was just amazingly resilient. I mean, from that homeless shelter through the next, it's now 33 years of my life, she's never taken a day off.
Wow.
Something of a superhero who works still on her feet, working to serve people meals and to take care of people, always in service herself. But she got an assist, right, from that homeless shelter that was run by the church and the food pantry, to the government programs that made sure that we could get a free bus to a public school, where public school teachers took care of us, not because we paid, $50,000 in tuition, but because they believed in our potential.
Yeah.
And the school board that fed us free breakfast and free lunch. Again, because they thought we'd give back, but because they knew it was a smart thing for our society to do.
So from your very early coming home from the hospital, you went straight to a shelter. Until about what age were you in shelters?
So it's the first 6 months straight in the shelter. Okay. And then the first 8 years we would call housing insecure. In and out of shelters. We'd stay for long stretches with, sometimes my mom could get it to, enough money together, and we'd put together long stretches in apartments. Sometimes we'd move back in with my grandparents. That's actually who, from age 8 on, moved back in with the grandparents, and then they eventually helped us get our own 2-bedroom apartment for what would then be the 5 of us. My younger sister came along. And then eventually a 4-bedroom house, right in time for me to start high school. I got my own bed, stopped sleeping in the same bed with my brothers, which was nice. It was a real Willy Wonka situation, with the grandparents at the beginning. Anyway, and that made all the difference, finding housing security right at a time when academics became more challenging. Folks expected you to be able to go home and do work without wondering if you're distracted at home, if you're hungry at home, if you're able to get privacy you need, especially as a teenager, all hormonal and cranky and stuff.
So let me pause. So let's go back, because you're telling me about what happened, but how did you feel when you were going to school and other kids were going home or going to the same place over and over again, did you get invited over to people's houses? Were you embarrassed? Did you know something was different? And what about, were you wearing the same clothes over and over again? Tell me a little bit about how your psyche was, because I think that's really important to understand where you were coming from.
Sure. Yeah. And Amanda, you're right. You're so right in that I was so blessed in if you've got to do what I did, if you've got to ever experience poverty in America, it's best to do it as a very small child. Every year of my life was better than the year before. And what that meant is that the only frame of reference, I've only ever my whole life felt lucky, right? Because the only frame of reference I had was like, wow, this Christmas really is better than last Christmas.
So you didn't look at like somebody down the way or that classmate's Christmas and say, well, mine doesn't look like theirs.
So eventually I did. And by the time that you start doing that, that's really, if you get into like 4th, 5th, 6th grade, 7th grade is when it becomes really heavy. We were beginning to get more stable. We at least had our own apartment. But it did, the first time you're having friends over.
Yeah.
And they're like, there's a lot of you, and there's 5 of you, and there's only 2 bedrooms. Like, where's your sister sleeping? With my mom. And there's 3 of you in this one bed. And I was like, yeah. So you don't know enough to be self-conscious. You think that everybody's wearing their older brother's hand-me-downs all the time. High school, it did get tough. And that's when you start to develop some of these insecurities and neuroses around, my school actually very wisely eventually changed their way of, so before you would come in for lunch and they would, if you had free lunch, the cafeteria workers would just know it and they wouldn't ask you for any money and you just walk by. And that was something I was very embarrassed about. So I used to skip lunch sometimes or I'd wait 45 minutes into the lunch period until there was no line. And then I'd try and sneak through so nobody would see me. I remember too, once having a plate full of food, 2 other kids came in behind me and I didn't want them to see me not pay. So I dropped the tray and just walked out. And they eventually changed to this keypad system where everybody had to enter a code and it looked like you were, pulling up. Anyway, yeah, all of that was real and all that's in there. You're worried about your sneakers, you're worried about, and you're 15 anyway. So you're thinking, you're insecure even if you were financially secure.
So you've got worry on your mind. So we'll go back to younger Svante as opposed to now young Svante, but really young Svante. Okay, so how did you have an opportunity at that time to get past your worry? So were you thinking about things like your grades? Were you thinking about what you wanted to be? Or were you more aligned, preoccupied with what are we going to do today? Or where am I going to stay tonight?
Honestly, it wasn't until, when I say 9th grade was just in time, I mean, it was just in time. I think if we had not been settled, because it just didn't seem important. Like when we were walking, so in this one place we lived, it was a new housing development downstate. And it was new. I mean, it was like, it smelled new. The paint was still like wet when we moved in. It like looked nice. It was a housing project. But it was 3 miles outside of that city center, outside of the city. And to get to the grocery store, there was like no sidewalk. You just had to like walk down this road and we would jump into the gutter when the cars were coming, like jump back out. And we'd all be like loaded down, like packed mules with groceries. And we had to like, again, same thing. You'd go with food stamps and you'd wait until there was nobody in line because you didn't want anybody to see that you were using food stamps.
Right.
And I was doing odd jobs. I mean, starting from like 11 years old. 11 years old, I started a window washing company. Me and my friend, we would do it actually. We ended up doing it every summer through school. S&S, Svante and Steve.
Oh, so this is like branded and everything.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
We won't be a pain in your glass. Our slogan.
Did you come up with that?
Nah, that was my mom. And it was, and we charged 50 cents a window, go around and we mowed lawns and we shoveled snow and we all pitched in. Like we'd have these big budget meetings every week with my mom. We'd show how much money we've got. We'd list out all the expenses and we'd decide what bills got paid. So for those first 8 or 9 grades, I mean, K through 8th grade, I just didn't care. I mean, my grades were terrible. They put me in remedial classes because it just didn't seem important. They would say, here's the math homework. And I'd look at it and I'd go, oh, I could do this. So I just wouldn't even think about it again. And 2 days later, they'd be like, where's the homework? I'm like, oh, you wanted me to do that? Yeah, I don't know. It just wasn't very important to me. Because you're so it's exhausted. You know, Amanda, you're tired. You walked home along this highway. You're jumping into gutters. You're doing mental math constantly. The gallon of milk is $3. A half gallon is $2.70. Okay, that's not as good a deal, but maybe that 30 cents will help you get, instead of the dozen eggs, you can get 2 dozen eggs. How long do the eggs last? Well, it depends how many pancakes I want. Okay, there's 5 of us. We need pancakes, 3 pancakes a piece. How much flour can we afford? There's milk.
So you're doing your mental math. Yeah, you don't need the math homework. You've already done it in terms of survival.
It is so, people who've never been broke in America.
Yeah.
Believe that poor people are lazy. It is so hard to be poor in America. It is exhausting. And if I hadn't hit right in 9th grade, if we hadn't become, because now here's a point in which my oldest brother's working, my middle brother's working, my sister's working.
Okay.
Each of us working like 20 hours a week after school.
Okay.
Putting money in. My mom has 2 jobs. She's working with old folks and she's working at the hospital.
Okay.
My grandparents are helping us, right? So they're helping us like buy clothes, so we don't have to be so self-conscious. And they filled our house with books and music. So my grandma's a librarian, my grandpa's a music teacher. Union jobs, right? So they could retire with a pension that was like, you know, they have no money. They don't have any money, but they had enough income that they can buy like a boat and a mansion in Florida, but they could help support us. All of that starts clicking in 9th grade. So now,
and you're still in Florida, right?
No, we're back up in upstate New York now.
Okay.
And now I can go to school. I come home. I know where we're going to live, not just tonight, and not just next week, but I know next year we're going to be in the same house. And so I don't have that worry. And it just suddenly made, you know, taking care of the present allows you to think about it. Give you space to think about it.
It's like it's a luxury. So you get to have an ability to look forward as opposed to just immediately in front of you.
Which is why, you know, you hear the thing, and I heard it so much my whole life. People say, give a man a fish, feed him for a day.
Yeah.
Teach a man to fish, feed him for a lifetime.
Yeah.
Which is certainly true, and that's why I believe education is the key to building better futures for everybody. But have you ever tried to teach a hungry man to fish?
Right.
It does not go well. You can't teach a hungry person anything because the hungry, right?
The basic core fundamental.
Exactly. It's Maslow's hierarchy. Make sure your basic needs are met: security, housing, safety, food, and then you can go to work on. And that's why I think, you know, especially the conservative mindset that says we need to condition social support on people having jobs. It's like, all right, you can't. It is so difficult to do the things we need you to do, to go to night school, to pull yourselves up by your bootstraps if you are terrified and in poverty all the time. Which is why like a guaranteed income is I think a fascinating concept. So I got to, you know, I went from remedial classes to suddenly I'd hand in my homework and my teachers would go, oh, so you did know this whole time. And I took with remedial to normal to honors. And then my junior year, I took the SATs. Everything changed.
So what did you know about the SATs before you took them?
I knew my brother did pretty good.
Okay.
My middle brother, I'd never heard of him until he took them.
Okay.
And he was like the 10th best score in his class.
Okay.
And so he'd never shut up about it. He'd tell you his score the next day. It was very annoying. And so that's all it took for me to want to beat him. And I got the best score in my class, best score in my school for many, many years. And my counselor was like, oh, we're going to be looking at different schools now.
So basically what you're saying is that achievement, so you actually had to kind of stumble upon this achievement before your eyes were open to what could happen as a result. So because you showed the aptitude, then you began to talk about new or different colleges rather than not talk about college at all.
For sure. And I think it's one of those things too where you have to believe in other people's belief in you until your own can kick in. So like these teachers kept, and I didn't trust it. You know, when you grow up poor, you can become mistrustful of everything. people say they're going to be there, but we moved 10 times by the time I was 8, right?
Yeah.
So you make friends, you leave, you make other friends, you leave. Grown-ups say they're going to help, but then they're not there, and you just stop trusting it. And it took years and years of these teachers showing up for me before I was like, they actually do think I'm going to be something. Like, they think I'm going to not be something, but do something. And and it really did. And the test it's such a stupid way to do that. SATs don't measure anything except like, can you read this and remember it? But having a score there in black and white that said you're qualified, it really did make a difference. It made me go, okay, I guess I am.
So who did you want to become? What did you say? Did you know what college was supposed to be able to do for you in terms of become this gateway and this education space, but then also basically prepare you for whatever was to come in a career path? Or did you get that far?
I don't think I got what I was always fascinated by the world, but like afraid of it, because I would have all this anxiety around travel. Because again, if you've ever been broke, the thing where I got a quarter tank of gas.
Yeah.
$17. Gas is, I don't want to say how much gas was then, because it was $1. And you would go, okay, it's $1.50 today for gas, and it's $17. Slice of pizza is $1.25. You're like, and you had to just be aware constantly so that you don't get caught far from home with no money, no shelter, no food. And so I was always nervous about leaving home and going to college, but at the same time, I was a voracious reader. I mean, I used to skip school, again, because I didn't think school was important. I used to skip 40 days, 40 days a year of school. I would miss. But not because I was like out. I was just sitting at home reading. I loved to read. I loved to read fiction, nonfiction. So I read all these, Mark Twain books and Frederick Douglass and Malcolm X and Tolkien. And
so you were kind of self-educating.
Yeah,
a little bit.
And I had like given myself a tour of the world in my mind. That was the beauty of reading, that you can read your way out of poverty before you work your way out of poverty. Somebody said that.
Yeah.
So you go from doing a lot of self-educating at home, but you excelled academically after you took your test, and so then you get to college. Did you know who did you want to be, and what did you want to become, or what were your inspirations by the time you got to college?
Well, I wanted to be a writer. I just told you some of them because I thought I was actually going to be like Nicholas Kristof.
Okay.
Because, and I was going to like crusade and change the world.
Okay.
With my writing, because I still didn't see myself as a participant.
Why did you think you could be who you wanted to be? I guess is really the question. Did you like carry with you this notion that because you had such challenges over the beginning of the course of your life that you were limited, or did you actually see that as the reverse, which was, I actually got past that, so I'm pretty resilient? Or
I was very ashamed. Honestly, I was very ashamed. My biggest fear is that I'd get to school, Cornell.
Yeah.
And people there would be able to tell that I was poor.
So that was like an underlying fear.
Yeah, it's just like shame. It, honestly, it's nothing else. My whole childhood, I just didn't want the kids at school, the other families, to know that we were poor. It was like, because again, I can believe in America, if you're poor, it's because you're bad. You did something wrong. You're unworthy. And it wasn't really until I started running for office that I'll tell you this, it was my mom who came and was canvassed, so I ran for city council my junior year.
Okay, so you're skipping some key pieces.
I know. Okay.
How did you get? Okay, I will let you tell your story, and then we're gonna get to the point of how on earth did you actually get the gumption to run for office. But I'll let you tell your story out of turn.
Like she had, because it's important for the question at hand, which is that my mom. So I'm 24, and I'm she's campaigning in West Village, which is like near my house now. It's one of our housing projects.
Okay.
And she comes back to the office. She's like rattled. And I was like, thought it was weird because I was like, Mom, you've lived in tougher housing projects than that. Like, what's the problem? She goes, they didn't believe. She goes, I'm knocking on doors, and they were scoffing like, oh, that kid who wears a tie, like, he doesn't know anything about us. He's not going to help us. He's not about this. Mm-hmm. And she got upset because she's like, you need to tell people who you are. You need to tell them where you came from, because this thing that you've created, the Cornell kid with the tie, like, that's fine, but they need to understand that the reason you're in this is for them. But even honestly, I was still hesitant to really talk about it until after I won, because then I did think somehow I was validated enough to be like, haha, I did this, and here's my secret hidden shame this whole time. It was that I was a poor kid, you know?
Yeah.
Now it turns out everybody knew because people talk and whatever. But anyway, so the question you asked is, did I think I could be who I wanted? No, absolutely not. And that's in fact why I thought I would be a writer, because I thought that's as close as I could get to the action. And that people like me, like if you're going to be in politics, you had to have a name like George Herbert Walker Bush, William Jefferson.
So in other words, you were interested in politics, but you told yourself no. You said those doors are not open for somebody like me. I'm less than because I don't have the right pedigree or background. Even though you were in an Ivy League school, you still thought you did not have the right pedigree, if you will, to be in a role like that.
That's right. You only become mayor if your father was a successful businessman.
Yeah.
You only become governor if your father was the mayor. You only become president if your father was the governor. That's how I understood, and honestly is a fairly fair reading of American political history.
Yeah.
Until, Barack Obama.
President Obama, who at that moment before wasn't President Obama, was the unlikely person with the hard, funny name to pronounce. How did that happen? And how did that impact you? And what were you doing at that time?
It's my junior year of high school.
Okay.
2 days before his convention speech, I start hearing from my grandma follows politics, my high school counselor follows it, and I follow it. It's the only three people I know that follow politics.
Okay.
We start talking about, there's a guy. Here's what I remember. I remember two things. They said he's running for Senate in Illinois. He and his wife walked into a movie theater, and the crowd spontaneously burst into applause. That was the first thing I heard. Second thing I heard was the Republicans can't even field a candidate to face him. They tried to recruit Mike Ditka, and that didn't work. I remember hearing that. 17 years ago. I still remember. And I was like, Mike Ditka, the Bears in Illinois, and even he couldn't fit, like, who is this guy? And he was mixed. And they said his father is black and his mother's white, just like you. Strange name, just like you. And he's giving the big speech Thursday night. We're gonna watch it. Do you wanna watch it? And so I watch by myself. I call my counselor that night. It's like 10 o'clock at night. I email my grandma, and this is how smart I am. I emailed her and said, it's a shame that somebody like that smart and that eloquent could never be president. So much so that my sophomore year of college, when I had to decide, I had the chance to run for the city council or the chance to go work in his Senate office in Illinois. And I was like, well, city council is once in a lifetime opportunity. Barack Obama will be the junior senator from Illinois for the next 40 years. He's not going anywhere. So I'll go work for him later if I want to. That was the wrong choice. But yeah, he changed who I thought could pass in the arena, could actually be an active participant in politics, and not just, and it wasn't just him. There were other, that same guidance counselor had to go out of town during a scheduled parent-teacher debate, parent-teacher association board debate for the candidates, and he asked me to moderate that debate. And it was the first time. There was not a school thing. It wasn't the high school debate club. It wasn't mock trial. Somebody handed me a real live microphone and said, you decide what questions to ask. This is going to inform voters in the decision they make. I also started hosting a radio show at Colgate University, which is 15 minutes up the road from us. Same thing, a live microphone. There's no rules. They say you pick your own programming. You decide what you want to talk about. All those things together made me start thinking, wow, maybe I don't have to just be a witness. Maybe I don't just have to record history. Maybe I can be an active participant in this thing. Now, come to find out that there's very few things that are as powerful as being a reporter, right? Deciding how you report a story and what makes news, right?
Yes.
That's what we're finding out now. It's like the media has just sort of decided that Trump can do any scandalous thing he wants. And the people don't care, so we won't treat it like it's a scandal.
Right.
I think if they treated it like a scandal, the people would care.
So I want to go back to this running for office thing. So you thought you could be a writer. You thought you could inform the world or help to shape the world through the stories you told and through writing. But then you decide to run for office. Tell me about this leap and how you thought suddenly that Svante could go beyond, and nothing being wrong with being a writer, certainly a very, very, very significant role in society, but it's just a different job than what you ended up pursuing, which was politics. So how did you actually make the leap? And I often talk to people about my own trajectory, because I always tell people, yes, I've always been interested in public service, and there's a very big difference between an interest in public service and actually going and making the leap and running for office. It involves a little bit of insanity, but but you've got to overcome these crazy fears. Like for me, I remember thinking like the world was literally going to combust if I said I was going to run for office, or in fact announced a candidacy. I don't know what the anxiety you have built up is about. In mine, it was probably just the uncertainty. But just generally speaking, it's a crazy leap to make. So I'd like to understand how you went from Svante the writer to Svante the mayor. But I know there were a few steps in between.
There were. I mean, that's, this is how I know that writing is harder. I wasn't good at it. And I was like, I'll be Nicholas Kristoff. And then I'm like, listen, you are no Nicholas Kristoff.
No, you're not.
That was always finding stuff you're good at is important, but I got really active. I think it's just like, why do any young people do anything? It's the crowd I was hanging out with. I fell in with the wrong crowds. I started tutoring and mentoring kids. I became convinced because of what happened in my life. Getting that acceptance letter to Cornell was like, it was the moment everything changed.
So you knew it was a game changer when it happened, or you didn't quite understand?
Immediately. I still remember the feeling, the like tingle on my skull from front to back that said, it was a piece of paper that said, it was like a passport.
Yeah.
To the world that said, we're going to accept you, we're going to let you in, not just to the school, but into a world of opportunity that's different than just working at the grocery store where I worked.
Yeah.
And that feeling I wanted to give to other people. So I was like, education, that's the key, that's the secret. So I was tutoring, and then I ended up running the tutoring program, and then I ended up running this other youth service program. And I stayed in Ithaca every summer to work with Ithaca. And after 3 summers of that, somebody said, look, there's this guy who, just like you, he's 4 years older than you, black guy, he works with young people too, and he's on the city council. Got himself elected to city council when he was 20 years old. And he's looking for an assistant. And so a mutual friend connected us. In fact, it was the same friend that said, or I have a friend in Senator Obama's office, you can go work for him. And I was like, let me talk.
Your friend is very connected.
Yes, Candy, she was incredible. And I met Gayrod, and he was a trip. He's very different than me. He's very extroverted, very charismatic, very like sure of himself.
So wait a minute, Svante, that's what I often see. So Are you really introverted? Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about that. Because I think sometimes people, when they're thinking about their career paths or thinking about what's possible for them, some things seem a little bit outside of their comfort zone. So they think, I can't do that. Or I can't go in that crowd and shake all those hands or just start speaking off the cuff. Tell me how you thought, given your, I guess, introverted tendencies. I have introverted tendencies too, so I understand. But how did you understand that you could also walk into this world that would require you to be very out and engaged and with people and social and personable?
I think we do something of a similar. So when I've watched you work, I think we're actually very similar in that.
Okay.
When you see me like at the Aspen Institute,
Yeah.
debating with the Attorney General of wherever,
Yeah.
that's not the confidence to do that isn't coming from that dirty little kid in Florida who like didn't know where he was going to sleep that night. That's me doing an impression of Gay Rod, channeling somebody that I respect and looked up to, and trying to figure out how to, using his voice to deliver my words. Or when we were speaking together at a panel at Harvard, I'm thinking of all the thousands of hours of Barack Obama YouTube clips that I watched to try and see, okay, you've got something you want to say, but use his voice to do it, because you can't use yourself,
It's kind of like how Beyonce used to have Sasha Fierce, right? This is your Sasha Fierce.
That's exactly. In finding, because speaking has always been hard for me, as speech impediment as a child, and then public speaking like brings back all those, not just things about your voice, but God, people looking at me, they can tell their shoes, they can tell this is my uncle's shirt, and you just want to retreat. But if you have this thing that's burning inside you, all these words that were inside me from all these books, and this like vision of the world that I wanted to create, you're like, something's got to give. You got to get those words out, but you can't do it in your own voice. So you channel somebody else until that channel becomes your own voice. If that makes sense. And that was it. Gay Rod, he was so extroverted. He showed me. I actually ended up working for him for a year. I would come to city council meetings, take notes. I covered a couple council meetings because I wrote for the Cornell Daily Sun, again, very badly. And it was my junior year. So I was 20 years old, and Gay Rod was off to some new adventure in New York. The seat was open, and he said, I'll show you how to run for it if you want it, but you got to stay for all four. It's a 4-year term, right? This is not a student government thing. I've never done government. He's like, this isn't the student government thing. You have to be committed to the city if you're going to do this. And that was because that's the first time too where there aren't obvious. You pass 10th grade, you go to 11th.
Right.
12th grade, you go to 12th.
Right.
You pass 12th grade, you go to college. This was the first time where it's like the whole world opens up.
Yeah. It's overwhelming.
Of course, it's overwhelming. And you got to make a choice that could determine who you're going to be for the rest of it.
And we often feel when we make those choices that there are permanent choices, right? Like, so you say, if I don't make the right choice in this moment, I have, basically choose, in the choose your own adventure books, I've chosen the wrong path and this is going to be the end of the book.
And so funny, isn't it? So ridiculous.
Yes.
And we still do it. I don't know if you still do it.
Oh, yes, all the time.
We look back at our like 18-year-old selves and like, it doesn't actually matter where you go to school. You can go
you're fine.
It doesn't matter what kids now, they don't believe it.
No.
They'll ask me for advice, like, what should I major in? And I'll tell them, like, oh, it doesn't matter.
They don't believe you.
They're like, no, it's very important. They're like, people will ask for the rest of your life. Not my experience.
No.
So that one I wrestled with quite a lot, whether to run or not. But it was, by the time I ran, it was because I'd been hanging with a bad crew of young people who were interested and engaged in civics and politics.
Okay.
So that's why I'm truly a big believer that our nature is important, but our nurture even more so. Who we are around, what kind of influences we have, what kind of role models we have access to. And that's a big part of why I think a integrated and segregated, integrated, not segregated society is really important, because if we just keep all the poor folks living in poor neighborhoods, we are locking them out of a world of access and just opportunity.
And an ability to dream, right? So how do you know what exists, particularly like some of the career paths that are not televised, or something that, you know, are more high profile but maybe extremely meaningful careers for someone, or trajectories for someone? How do you even know about them until you've met somebody who's done that, or you've come across that, or someone shares that with you? And so being in a space in which you don't have that exposure it snuffs out your ability to really realize your full potential.
And all these kids who you see in The Graduate, where he goes, "Plastics, young man, plastics."
Yeah.
Like, and that's a joke line in the movie, but it's actually like really important. Here comes this guy who just graduated from college. Some rich guy in his neighborhood puts his arm around him and says, "You don't know anything about the world, but I'm going to tell you one thing that could change your life. Plastics." Right? Now, we tell this other story of American success. We tell this other story of like mythological greatness about Steve Jobs in his garage alone, creating Apple, or Bill Gates creating Microsoft. But if they didn't live in a neighborhood that already had computer engineers, if they didn't have parents that could buy them personal computers back in 1978, like if you bought some kid in Watts a personal computer in 1978, they could have been Bill Gates too, right? Those opportunities to create American icons and titans are not stories of self-made men in their garages, but stories of interwoven communities that are conspiring to make them successful. And we could conspire in the same way for every kid in America, like we do for some of those affluent kids in those affluent suburbs.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point. And I think something that we often don't acknowledge, and so in terms of how difficult it is when you come from a circumstance where you don't have the exposure, you don't have the support network or the connective tissue, and still manage to get past that experience and disadvantage in some sort, and still propel yourself forward, even to a world that you might not have even known about, like was in your case. So let me fast forward to this running for office thing. Was it, I mean, I've never been to Ithaca, so you have to share this with me. Was this a difficult race? It was open. When I had an open race, when I ran for office for the first time, it was 7 of us in the race. I later learned that that's actually not a lot of people, but at the time it seemed like an enormous race. And in terms of a lot of people, were there lots of people in the race, or were you scared? What made you decide to go ahead and jump?
Yeah, so I'm 24 now. I'm doing social work full time.
Okay.
I'm
just to clarify to the viewers and the listeners out there, he's not 24 now in 2020. Don't try to reverse the hands of time, Svante. I caught that.
Okay.
And I'm watching. I'm in the city council meetings, and that's where I feel most alive, is when I'm inside City Hall.
Okay.
But I'm frustrated. I'm losing a lot of my issues building more affordable housing. We're not getting it done. And I was going to go to law school and leave public life. Like I thought, I'll go to law school and I'll come back, or maybe get a job at the mayor's office for a few years, and then I can run for mayor in my 40s. But a few things happened all at once, including a good friend of mine passed away, George. And his funeral, I was really touched by both speaking with his priest, he's Catholic, and hearing his eulogy about how even a short life, if lived fully, is a good life. And
and we recently saw that with Chadwick Boseman.
Right? How, if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run.
Yeah.
That guy filled the minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run. I mean, Chadwick was, and George was the same way. And I don't know, I just did it. It was a moment of, I think you said it was a moment of madness.
Mm-hmm.
And I like committed right there, and I called everybody. This was the key. I called my mom. I called the current mayor, who at the time was running for re-election. I called everybody on the city council. I called some folks I thought could donate to the campaign. I must have made 40 phone calls that first day.
Mm-hmm.
I woke up the next day and was like, oh, I don't want to run for mayor. That's crazy. But it was too late because I had like told everybody and asked for people's endorsements.
Well, so wait, you went from city council. So you went from city council to the mayor?
Yeah.
Tell me how that.
Well, so Carolyn, so that was the idea, is that I was going to announce. And one of my other mentors, Nathan Shinagawa, who'd been on the county legislature here since he was 23 years old,
Mm-hmm.
30 at the time. So I was like, oh, he knows everything. He's 30. He's like, here's what we're going to do. You're going to announce before anybody else.
For which position? Which one?
Okay,
so you'd moved on from city council.
I was still on city council, but my term was coming to an end. So
Okay,
I
got it.
run for re-election. I could go off to law school.
Got it.
And he goes, you're going to like announce that you raised $10,000. You're going to raise $10,000. You're going to have 5 key endorsers from the city council, the county legislature stand behind you. And you're going to announce first, and you're just going to scare everybody else out of the race. And so I do that. I announce we got $10,000 with 5 key endorsers. But the first one's out, and 2 weeks later, 6 other people are in the race. So we ended up having a 4-way primary, and then a 3-way general. And I won the primary with 50% of the vote, the general with 55%.
Okay.
And it was intense. I mean, it was, in a college town. The students don't vote much. A lot of them vote back home, if at all.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of skepticism about the campuses, which seems like it would be the inverse, right? Everybody's got some sort of connection to Cornell. They send their kids there, or they work there, or they went there themselves. But it's a behemoth. They don't pay property taxes. Their local relations, community relations are strained even to this day.
People are transient who come there.
Yeah, and there's just mistrust. Like, is this kid coming off the hill? Who does he care about? Does he care about school? Does he care about us? But I knocked on every door in the city 2.5 times.
Okay.
And my campaign knocked on every door in the city 14 times. And by the end, they were, voters were like, listen, I will vote for you if you let me finish my dinner.
So you got on everybody's nerves enough where they just said, please just go away. Stop knocking on my door if you come back here one more time.
It's like when you're watching basketball and you're like, if I see one more Ford commercial, I'm going to lose it. But then when you're in the market for a car, you're like, maybe I should get a Ford. You want to like irritate voters with your omnipresence. And then when they go on the ballot, they're like, oh yeah, that guy.
So I want to understand some of the challenges, because I think, we often paint this picture, and we, especially when we're on the other side of it, that it was this exhilarating experience and it didn't have really ugly, nasty, difficult parts of it. And I think for people who are really kind of using this platform, or I hope that they would pause and relate this to their own experience, their own life, whether they're thinking about running for office or not, or just what they're dealing with. A lot of it is not pretty, right? And I think a lot of the times, because the pictures are so glossy at the end, if you've won the race, and it's such a, story of triumph, that we forget about the difficulty in the journey. Even if the journey really is your journey, it's not always promised to be easy. So tell us a little bit more about some of the challenges that you faced. Did you ever want to quit when you were in that road? And then what stopped you from quitting or giving up?
Yeah, I wanted to quit on the second day of the race. I wanted to quit literally the next day. I was like, I don't want to do this. And I do. That's actually one bit of advice I can give. And I gave this advice. So the same day I decided to run for mayor, I was listening to my good friend Scott. He wrote a book about making things happen, Scott Belsky. And one of the things he's a serial entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things he tells other entrepreneurs is the moment you get an idea, tell everybody, tell your competitors, because now you got to do it, right?
Yeah.
You tell them, And if it's a good idea, they're going to be off to the races, which means you have to be off to the races, and it like keeps you committed. And that helped. And there were just days when you know, politics is a very funny business because I think it attracts a lot of people with high confidence but low self-esteem.
Say that one more time. One more time. I just think people should note that. Yes.
Yeah, people who like, look, if you are so confident in your own abilities that you want to have yard signs made, but you're so insecure that you can only feel good if you see your name all over the city. Like that's the tension that is inside of a lot of our politicians.
And may I interrupt as you say that, because I think also that's not the reason you should be running. So if that is you, even if you may not have thought about it that way before, pause and think about it. That's not a good reason to run, because the work is far too hard and far too important for that to be the basis for you running, let alone having a life in public service.
That's a fact, because you're going to get this the grindy stuff is going to you're going to find out it's not worth it, and you're going to find out that you end up doing weird stuff to make people happy, the things that you don't believe in, things that were the opposite of what you believed in. Like, this business is not for the faint of heart, and it's not for people who really need to be loved.
Yeah. And I think you hit the nail on something, which is that the love or the appreciation you get from the outside or the external, you've got to be able to have that internally first. Otherwise, you're going to lose yourself. And I think a lot of people use the outside and the adoration or the, appreciation or applause, if you will, as a meter for their own value. And I think that's a mistake, and it's easy to do and not even be aware of or conscious of it.
I've done it. Yeah. I've done it, especially when I was younger.
Because you were so young. How did you know who Svante was before you got into that space?
It's really, and I mean, in many ways it was not a healthy way to figure out who I was at 25.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, oh, I have got myself figured out. I was on Meet the Press.
Yeah.
That's who I am.
Right, but that's not an identity. I mean,
yeah.
And what's more, you'll make yourself sick chasing it. It can become just like drugs.
Yeah.
You get your name in the school newspaper, and you feel high, and now you get it in the second time, and you're like, it's weird I didn't feel as high. Maybe if I get it in the New York Times, then I'll feel good. Maybe if I get the cover story, that worked, but I think I need more. Let's get in Time magazine. And
when you don't get those things, who are you? And because you've defined yourself as what you've accomplished and who's seeing your name rather than who you actually are at heart.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it's really, it's not healthy. No. And you're going to get knocked down. So that's the thing, is I do think a lot of people get into politics because they see politicians and, ooh, it looks glossy, and that's how I'm getting myself trained. But most people never deal with the kind of stuff you've dealt with, which is like, most people, and this is why when you talk to folks and they're like, oh, my boss is a jerk. It's like, why is your boss a jerk? It's like, they said two things to me this year that were critical. And both things are in my head. On our way to work, we called an asshole, pardon my language, 6 times. People read it right.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And like most folks, that's not a part of their daily life, is strangers, not just strangers, but colleagues, directly and publicly calling them names, criticizing them, and questioning not only their aptitude, but also their intentions, right?
Yeah.
Rarely do you don't show up to work as a chef and have somebody walk up to you and be like, you want this restaurant to fail. I believe you're intentionally undermining this restaurant. In fact, I think you're working with Russia, colluding with Russia to make this restaurant fail, right? But that's what you deal with in politics a lot. And so unless you figure out, and for me it was a journey, I sort of did it while I was working. Unless you figure out why you're in it.
Yes.
What is so important to you that just like those words, what is it that's burning in your chest?
Yeah.
that you would walk through fire to get out, what would you walk through fire to get done?
Yeah.
Then when people close is they physically slam a door in your face.
Yes.
Pleasant thing to experience.
Yeah.
Cuss you out in the street.
Yes.
Say
things that are not even true.
Right. Make up stuff. Write
Yeah.
letters to the editor with made up stuff.
Yeah.
Orders, doing all sorts of, until you've been tested like that, it's hard to know, how what your convictions are. And so,
And just to you touched on something that I would love for people to make a note of. One of my favorite books is Simon Sinek's Starts with Why. And that book talks about that personal mission, that why. So how, you can have lots of folks that lead organizations or lead efforts, but the question becomes, when you're looking at transformational leadership or people, following in a movement, it's because of that mission, that answer to why, and that relating or tying to those other folks. And so when you are on a mission to accomplish something as a community and you've got a clear vision and you desire to execute that, that's when the community sees and understands or appreciates that they're benefiting themselves and their surroundings by supporting you, rather than just Svante getting his name in the paper or one more notch on, or one more check for him or win for him. It becomes less about him as an individual and more about what he means for us. And I think that piece of this, when the voter can make that connection, or the constituent or the resident, I think that's when democracy is working for people. When it's about the politician, then there's a disconnect, and maybe perhaps because they have not been, in terms of government, having that healthy relationship with the community.
Yeah, and it's so true. And you won't hit your stride. Like, you won't be able to do what you came for unless you are able to figure that out. I'm privileged now to run something called the Young Elected Officials Network, which is a network of 13.
Are you too old to be in this?
First of all, we're not like Menudo, okay? We don't get people out.
Okay.
All right, I'm teasing you. I'm teasing you.
I appreciate it. No, but at 35, anybody who's elected under the age of 35.
Okay.
And I was in this network, and 10 years ago, they brought me to the White House, and we all met President Obama.
Mm-hmm.
And, this is my first time meeting the president, and from reading his book cover to cover, over and over after watching that first speech, and my grandma getting so excited, I had this expectation that, he was going to see me in the crowd, shake his hand, and be like, "Hey, I'm the city councilman. It's the youngest in New York State history." And he'd be like, "Really? Well, come on out back. We'll play."
Is that your impersonation?
Yeah. Did you have fun? Can you do it?
No, I cannot.
We'll stay for dinner, and you can live here with us. And I thought that he was gonna adopt me as a son. And, because that's the way it works in Matilda. And I never forget it. And he looked at us. He goes, "I can tell you're all very proud of yourselves, and you should be. You've accomplished something. But be sure, be very sure that you're in this line of work to do something, not just to be someone."
Say that one more time.
I
just for the record.
To do something, not just to be someone.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, and honestly, man, it took me 2 years to get over that. That I felt like he was scolding us when I came to be congratulated. And I didn't need to be congratulated. I needed to be reminded.
Yeah.
He'd done exactly what I needed in that moment, which was to tell me all right, some of you, he could just sense it. All right, some of you are very happy with yourselves.
Yes.
Cool. But that's not what this work is about. You can go be happy with yourself as a private citizen. If you're supposed to be representing the people, that's what this is about.
So I think what you highlighted was so important in terms of that needed gut check and making sure that you're continuing on the right path. So as opposed to getting away from that. And I want to kind of now pivot a little bit to discussing your time as mayor. And, again, everyone sees the ability to sign your name as mayor so-and-so and so-and-so, or get recognized at, so-and-so's event. But besides for that, what has been some of the highs of your term as mayor, your times as mayor, and then also some of the most significant lows? And for the lows, I want to know how you got through them or are getting through them, because I think oftentimes we talk about everything as if it's past tense, and sometimes you might be going through some of your more significant challenges as we speak.
So true. Yeah, and I think it's, the highs have always been when I felt grounded in that original mission. I remembered that I'm here to do something, not just, because you're right, there is almost something intoxicating, not just intoxicating, but like unhealthily challenging about, you go to the rubber chicken dinner. That's what we call it. Almost every night there's a rubber chicken dinner somewhere in town. Rotary is having their annual awards, or the Downtown Business Association, or the Latino Civic Association. They're actually there. But the honoraries set up front, right? The distinguished guests, and they're like, I want that seat. I want to sit up front. Recognized. That's cool for about a week.
Yeah.
The things that can really sustain you are, like, we've built more affordable housing in the last 9 years. Any other 20-year period in this neighborhood. We rebuilt the Commons area. We've refocused our transportation network to serve people like me, young, poor kids, to make sure that they can get to work and schools safely, back and forth on their bikes and walking, and really knit the city back together in ways that are cultural and important, and just little stuff like my best friend and I, the ones who started that window washing company when we were kids.
SNS. Okay, I'll pay attention.
Good. You're good. This is going to be a great podcast. We would play on this basketball hoop that was arranged east to west, which means that at every point in the day, the sun was going to be in somebody's eyes, right? Sun rises and sets. So whether you're on offense or defense, you've got sun in your eyes. And it was one of the many thousands of things that I said as a kid, if I were in charge, this would be different. You know what they should have done? I say that a lot. They.
Yeah.
I don't know who they were, but they should have done it. And we're rebuilding this one playground early in my first term. And they bring me the design drawings for the playground, and they say, Mayor, here's where the baseball court's going to go, and this basketball court. And I said, and I saw the court was lined up east-west. And I was like, this is it, Myrick. This is, your whole life was leading to just this moment.
You have become the proverbial they.
I said, I was, and I was like, I closed my eyes, I'm like, this is for Steve. And I said, shouldn't it go north-south? And they were like, right, that would be better. We'll make it north-south.
Nice.
I passed that basketball, right? It doesn't have my name on it. It's not it's a very small thing, but you just know little things like that. Really.
Yeah.
Now,
thinking about putting yourself in the person's shoes who's intended to
benefit.
Right. Now, the worst thing about this job, the hours are long and the pay stinks, right? But the worst thing about it is that what it does to the people closest to you, and makes them worry for you, makes them part of it, the dramas, and just makes yourself unavailable to them, especially if, like the two of us, you're on the introverted side. You have to expend so much energy
Yes.
with the public. You have to give so much of yourself to the public.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have enough to give to somebody, your romantic partner, a friend, your family. That's really, really hard. Really hard.
Yeah.
And they don't talk about, because then again on TV, by the time you see politicians on TV, they're smiling spouses, and I don't know. But it's really, I think that's the worst, hardest part.
Yeah, I had someone give me advice once, and when I was thinking about running the first time, and he told me don't do it, and I said what? I'm thinking because this is someone that I respect and has had a very very great impact on the community, and I said why would you think I shouldn't do it? And he said because you won't remember those years. It will just go by so fast. And I just thought, oh, I don't know what he's talking about. And sure enough, it does become very blurry. It isn't to say you don't love what you're doing most of the time, but it can create this strange existence that you just kind of zoom through it versus really be present, fully present in the other aspects of your life. So yes, you can be very, do a great job of being present for your constituents, but I think it doesn't come without a cost for sure.
No, you focus. Look, you nailed it exactly. And you can give yourself away.
Yeah.
I've certainly done that. Some ways I'm proud of, other ways I'm ashamed of. And it can make I achieved things that I never imagined.
Mm-hmm.
When I won re-election, it was 87% of the vote. I won a third 4-year term.
Oh, wow.
And never happened before.
Yeah.
And, I find myself now at 12, 13 years into this. I mean, I'm the oldest 33-year-old I know. It really is like, and what you focus, I really believe what you focus on, I'm not focused on my romantic, I'm not focused on all others, I'm focused on my health, I'm focused on, buying a house and starting a family and all that.
And I appreciate your candor because I think, it can, again, appear a certain way in terms of the images that are projected. But the reality is that I think we all struggle, whether you are walking in your purpose or you're not. Like you can, I believe that, Svante, you are walking in your purpose. However, that doesn't mean that just because you're walking in your purpose that there aren't challenges to that purpose for you, and there aren't setbacks that you experience or imbalances that you face, and that they magically somehow get cured. It's sometimes that's part of what you walked into or signed up for, and especially when you are on a pursuit of excellence in what you do, and if you really want to be there and you really want to make those transformational differences, not just go and do a ribbon cutting, but you really want to get in there and help to create pivot points for communities and to work alongside them. That's a lot of work, and that's a lot of time. And if you want to do the work well, you've got to make some significant sacrifices. And I just want to highlight that, not to complain or not to, highlight that as feel sorry for Svante or Amanda kind of thing, but more in line with just understanding that sometimes our dreams require extreme sacrifice, and it's an acceptance in, an attitude about it that you can't loathe the sacrifices either, because otherwise it's a weird space, I think. Don't you think?
I totally agree. And that's how I think it's important to be honest with folks.
Yeah.
With that, they can walk in armed with that knowledge. Because I've seen a lot of folks burn out because they didn't know. They just didn't know. And maybe prepared themselves. And we lose a lot of folks that would be talented public servants.
Yeah. And then, I'm not the best person to talk about this, but I think we all need to from time to time, and maybe COVID has helped us to do this. It's forced a lot of us to do this who would otherwise not, but really kind of make sure that we don't put ourselves in a position where we're not good for anybody else because we, like you said, burned out or not taking good care of ourselves, or God forbid something happened health-wise that you didn't bother to go to the doctor to get checked out. So exactly. That's right. I like that. Another slogan. Okay. So let me ask this question of you, because I know how passionate you are, and I know we're getting short on time, but what's happening in your mind in terms of what people can be doing, how you see this social unrest, the protests in the street, resulting from the incident after incident, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, you name it, in terms of police brutality caught on film. So not to mention those occurrences that are not caught on film. What do you see as what should be happening? Is what is happening right now the course we should be on? What should happen next? And how would you advise people who are feeling very anxious, feeling disconnected, feeling uncared for, feeling not a part of this community? How do you encourage them, or how would you share with them the ways in which they can get involved so that we don't continue to have to protest over and over again over the same issues that have never really been adequately addressed?
And that's, I think, folks blame the protesters as if the protesters are supposed to also come up with a solution. It's like expecting a fire alarm to also be a sprinkler and also put out the fire. Like, the fire alarm is supposed to get our attention. It's supposed to get everybody's attention. Say, hey, there's a fire over here. And that is what the protesters are doing. Say, hey, there's a problem over here. It's still a problem. Now, what we have to do to fix it is to change our laws, change our personnel, change our policies, change our society. What should encourage us is there's now broad recognition that the policing system doesn't work. Rather, it works to serve a purpose that the people no longer desire. That, using police to enforce segregation is no longer something that the American people want. So the good news there is that recognizing that gives us a chance to build something new, to build a replacement to that system. It results not only in less violence, but less incarceration, period. Right? There's the thing about the George Floyd murder, which really, and George, this guy physically just looked like my father, the same size, same age. Like, I could imagine that, and my father's been arrested, who knows how many times. And that's painful and traumatic for Black folks to watch people be killed just because they look like this at the hands of the state. But it's not like, and I think we should reach further than just saying, hey, that was wrong. You should have taken George Floyd into custody peacefully so that he'd get a 3-year prison sentence for a $20 bill that he'd serve out and come out with fewer job prospects, no housing, and no opportunities. That's the way the system should work, not that you kill them on the street. Right? We should go even further than just insisting that police violence stops. We should be ending the war on drugs. We should end mass incarceration. And we should replace it with systems that there's more good news, which is that we don't have to invent out of whole cloth systems that work to rehabilitate instead of punish people. Those systems already exist all over the world, and they exist inside of affluent families. Right? I can't tell you how many of the kids I met at Cornell, when they're caught using drugs or driving the car too fast or drinking, their parents don't send them to prison or don't put them in jail, but work with them to get them counselors, get them mental health treatment. They work with them to get them tutors. They send them into after-school programming, or they send them into athletics, because they know that investing in people is the best way to rehabilitate them, not punishing them. So I hope that people who are active about this, I think being in the streets is good, with megaphones is good. I think it's necessary, but not sufficient. That there is more work that you can be doing in boardrooms and boxes and on city councils and in city halls. And so getting involved with government, I know for a lot of people who are very new,
Mm-hmm.
activism and protest, government might seem like it's the problem. We don't want to get involved with them because it's corrupt.
Mm-hmm.
But that's like saying that the air is too polluted for us to plant new trees.
Yeah.
The trees clean the air. They are what recycles it and filters out the bad and replaces it with the good. And that's what you are. Your engagement in politics and government is good. And the people who are listening to this podcast are going to be trees just like Amanda, and create, a new breath and new life for the people who come after you, which is the mission.
Well, I think that's really, really powerful and important, because I think especially in times like this, when there's so much, people are watching so much TV, I think I've consumed more television than I've ever watched in my lifetime, just in this period of 6 months of COVID and this pandemic. And I think you absorb that, but I think it often leaves people with a sense of hopelessness, or instead of a drive to do something, a somewhat of a discouragement. And so having an understanding or appreciation that they can be part of the solution by, like you said, filtering out the bad and becoming what needs to be present, I think is really important. And you don't like who's running for office, and you run for office, or you find somebody you trust to run for office and you support that person. You make sure you're registered to vote. You make sure that you have registered other people to vote. It doesn't just stop with you. It's making sure that, going back to, I would say, high school, in my days of running for office when I was in high school, and you literally just count people, right? And you say, oh, well, I got these votes over here and these votes over here, and they are going to side with me. And it becomes as simple as that, in terms of having people who are aligned with your viewpoints, making sure they vote too, because your math will then work in your favor. And I think we can certainly, I think, reverse engineer the course that we've been on. But the first thing that was required was for us to get active. I can't say, and this, Svante, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. So if you don't make any noise, or people think that you're complicit with something or comfortable with something because you're silent, guess what? It's not going to change by virtue of you just having that thought cross your mind. You've got to, vocalize the concern that you have, put together a plan, or find someone who has one that you agree with, and then make sure that you vote those people into office that can help make that change happen, but then hold them accountable. I think that's the last piece of this that often gets dropped off, which is the accountability piece. Don't just go away after November 3rd. Now, when people are sworn in the top of the year, you need to be right there with them saying, okay, so when are you going to get this passed that we talked about on the campaign trail? And that's the type of engagement and the heightened engagement that really will lead toward change. Right. Right now we've got speeches about change. I don't want us to be in a space where we've got the speeches about change. I want us to actually see that change manifest. And I think it starts with the people and ends there with the people as well, in terms of holding the leadership accountable. So I have really enjoyed, Svante. This is much more detail and depth. I didn't get to get the age reveal that I was looking for. That'll come out later in another campaign, but
I got so many clues.
But I can't thank you enough, honestly, in terms of being such a strong leader, a strong advocate, someone who stands for your principles, someone who I think wants to also bring others along. And I think that piece of it is important, because someone that you mentioned, the prior city council member, invested in you, and your willingness to share your real life experiences, the truth, being honest with people. It sounds simple, but it's actually rare. And I really cannot thank you enough for being so candid today, and being willing to share with those that are listening and watching what your story was. And I hope that people will feel inspired by the way in which you were able to actually defy the odds, and how you got past some of the challenges you face and navigate through the challenges that you currently face. So I want to thank you for being my first guest on the Edwards Empowerment Talks. You truly were empowering. And for those who want to follow you or learn more about you, where can they find you on social media?
You can find me on Twitter at Svante Myrick. It's just spelled the usual way. Instagram, the same.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for joining us, and until next time.
I would like to extend a special thank you to the Texas Signal for its support of our podcast.